Sally Doty, Director of the Mississippi Office of Broadband Expansion and Accessibility, acronym BEAM stands for that, is in the Element Well studio. Thanks for coming on there, Sally. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
So I have to tell you that your title there, at least the office itself, that's a mouthful to get out, isn't it?
Well,
that's why we got BEAM.
I wanted to have a good acronym. So if you want to know the backstory to this, so I was the director at the Public Utilities staff, which was the PUS. Okay, so I had a vested interest when this was in the legislature to make sure that I had a great acronym. We did not want it just to be the Broadband Office, the BO. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Well, having worked, as you know, in the IT industry my entire professional career, it was nothing but an alphabet soup of acronyms. The whole industry's like that, as you now know, having worked around it. So.
Goodness, sometimes I will say a sentence that has all acronyms, and I'm like, what have I become?
It started with IBM. You know what IBM stands for, don't you?
I'm not quite sure that what you're going to say.
I've been moved.
Oh, there you
They
go.
used to move their people around just on a drop of a hat.
Yeah.
All the time. So I've been moved. That's what
I've been moved. Okay.
All right. So let's start with a little background, if you will, on how the office, the BEAM office, came about. What sort of was the catalyst for that?
There's a tremendous amount of federal funding that is coming down for broadband expansion, and it's going to be managed a different way, managed at the state level rather than from the FCC or from USDA, where our traditional broadband programs have been.
That's where it started, USDA.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why USDA.
Well, USDA has a certain program, the Reconnect program that has been very active for rural areas in the state. But then, there was another large program, the RDOF program, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and Mississippi was very successful in that. It got about $420 million. That was in 2020, and that's run by the FCC. But there were some issues with those programs, and at a state level, you are able to get more granular, know exactly where all the locations are, know where service is. We don't want to use this federal money to overbuild service or we want to put it in the right place. And so there was the thought from the feds that with this money, we want it to be run at the state level with oversight from the feds. Believe me, they have a lot of oversight and a lot of different hoops I have to jump through. But it was thought that we wanted a state agency to handle that, and they really encouraged every state to stand up a broadband office. Now, a lot of states already had a broadband office, but Mississippi did not. And we came into being in the 2022 legislative session. Governor signed it into law, I believe, April 13th of that year.
Yep.
And we really began work July 1 of 2022.
Okay. So the federal government, and I think there's a state aspect to this as well we'll get to in a second, but the federal government appropriated a fair amount of money with the goal of being to really make high-speed internet access ubiquitous in this country. We've got concentration of it in the large, densely populated areas, but this country has a lot of rural space as well, and we don't have that. In Mississippi in particular, we're a sort of a dispersed population, if you will. We don't have a lot of just large cities where most of our people live. We're pretty spread out across the state of Mississippi, and that kind of makes it even a bigger challenge when you're trying to light it all up with high-speed internet. And that's what this office is all about. The federal government has sent money. And the reason I said I think there's a piece of this that is critical from a state perspective, you may still been in the Senate, right, when we passed legislation which allows the cooperatives, the electric cooperatives, to be in the internet service business.
I was the chair of the Energy Committee and actually handled that bill in committee and on the floor.
Okay.
So was very involved in that. And really our electric co-ops were preparing for that RDOF award, that big influx of that first bit of federal money that came down for broadband expansion. So, yes, was very involved in it from the Senate standpoint. And then after COVID, I had the opportunity to move over to the public utility staff as the executive director there. I left the Senate, which was very hard for me to do because I really enjoyed my time in the Senate. But at the public utility staff, in addition to working with gas, electric, water, also had the opportunity to distribute some CARES Act funding to co-ops and some other providers, and then our office applied for some additional federal funding that was out there. So, I've step by step gotten into this world of broadband and broadband grants.
No, you've gotten an education to some extent, haven't you?
I believe I have. I have my master's, and I'm working on my PhD. Yeah.
All right. So, your role, the role of this office, is really to oversee the funding as much as anything, right? So this money comes down, and somebody has to decide which projects are going to get funded and who's going to, be the vendors of those projects, and then you allocate the money to them. So they request through. Yes. Is that the way it works? Tell us the process.
It is. So there are different funding streams, and so the one stream that we have we're working with all of them at the same time.
Sure.
So the first grant fund that we've been working with is the Capital Projects Fund.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. And it is ARPA funding. Every state was awarded a certain amount of money. Mississippi has $162 million. And so we have just finished up that grant round.
Yep.
Pardon me. I might have to get some water.
Yeah.
So we have just completed that application process, which means we now have some decisions to make.
Okay. A bunch of money is coming through, and you guys got to figure out who's going to get the money, essentially. That's what you're doing.
That's exactly
you're reviewing all of these requests at this point?
We are reviewing those,
okay.
Yes. So we, it's, as I said, it's $162 million. We are using some of that for some administrative funding to fund our office, to fund some of our mapping efforts, but we're going to give out, well in excess of $155 million.
Okay. Well,
for that, we got $550 million in applications. So, very much oversubscribed.
Oversubscribed.
Yes.
Well, that's an appropriate term because that's what we say when we got too much traffic being requested on a network. It's oversubscribed.
We are oversubscribed, so we have some very difficult decisions to make from our office over the next couple of months.
Yeah.
We have, gone through kind of that initial review of applications, and do you have all the documentation? We are using everything is on a grant portal that we stood up, and just doing those kind of things from the get go. Takes a lot.
From scratch, that takes some time.
It really does. Yeah. So we have a very sophisticated grant portal that we require everything to be uploaded to.
Okay.
We have recently reached out to every applicant and asked for some clarifying information, and so that's the step we're on right now. And then we'll be scoring. We had to develop our rubric, how we were going to score all these applications. So we are in the middle of reviewing those applications right now, and it's going to just take us a little bit of time to get those all scored. I think it's 157 applications.
Gee whiz.
Yeah.
All of the evaluation is being conducted by your team, or are there any third parties involved?
We have some third parties involved that assist us. So my team is a group of 6, and then we have one contractual employee that works with some community engagement activities that we have. But we have a third-party project manager, Horn local CPA group that works all over the nation, is our project manager. We have local attorneys who are our legal counsel. And so we will be working with them to make these determinations.
Okay. All right. So when do you expect you'll start awarding?
We hope to award I don't know. I'm hesitant to say.
That's fine.
I'm going to back off from making any projection, but I will say this. we need to award as soon as possible because this is ARPA money, and these projects have to be complete by 12/31 of 26.
Okay.
So it's a 2-year project. We got to get it out the door as quick as we can.
I know folks are chomping at the bit to get this stuff out there.
They are. They are.
Appreciate you coming in and giving us an update.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sally. Sally Doty, Director of the Mississippi Office of Broadband Expansion and Accessibility, a.k.a. BEAM, has been our guest in the Element Well studio. We're coming right back. We asked Sally Doty to stay over to talk about some other stuff. I'm sorry we didn't get to that, but tell us what else that you wanted folks to know about.
So I also want to talk about this BEAD funding, which really is the largest pot of funding that is coming. We're working on that CPF, awarding those grants now. But BEAD is the funding mechanism that really will bring service to the remainder of Mississippi. We intend to reach and believe we have the funding to reach every residential location in Mississippi. Yeah. And as part of that, I said, it's federal money, so it comes with some different steps that you have to walk through. So every state is working through these steps right now, and we are required to produce an initial proposal. And volume 1 of that initial proposal, which is due to the feds soon, we have completed and are going to put out for public comment. And it involves a list of all unserved locations, a list of all underserved and served. Now, that is, of course, not helpful looking at a bunch of numbers. So we are at the same time going to release a new map that will be on our website. All of this will be on our BEAM website, beamms.gov. Now, give me a couple of days. It's not going to be there till about Thursday. But by, I think, Thursday, we will have our initial proposal up, which has it talks about not only the served and unserved locations, but then also defines a challenge process. So if you look at that map and see that you are not served, then it's appropriate for a challenge. Now, again, the feds kind of define all this. So an individual cannot challenge this. It is a unit of local government, a nonprofit, or a internet service provider who can challenge the locations. I expect and have heard from a lot of nonprofits who are going to be busy in this field. Now, we think our map is pretty good. We ran a challenge process back in the spring prior to CPF, really among providers, kind of voluntarily. So we think our map is pretty good. But there are going to be some locations that are difficult. And so that challenge process will be out there. We will have, I feel sure there will be nonprofits working in certain communities where there's some questions about service. And also this gives another chance for providers to make sure that their areas are represented accurately on our map.
Okay. Interesting. And so I hear this question a lot. We talked about this off the air during the break. I hear this question a lot anytime someone's on the program discussing this subject of rural broadband and extending service to areas presently not receiving service. They all want to know when. When you going to come get me? I think 2 or 3 questions already on the C Spire text line today. How do you communicate that? How can folks find out?
So it is going to depend on when these grant funds are released. And for the BEAD money, which is the large pot of money, no state in the nation has that money released yet. We do not think that the feds will release that until over in the spring. Okay. And we expect to have our final proposal then with how we are going to reach everyone in the state, what provider, how that's going to happen, at least the first round of it. By the spring or summer, and then we will take off on construction. And then our job at the BEAM office will be more of monitoring projects. And we'll have an army of accountants and compliance monitors, but we will be watching all of that, all those projects as they're built out, and make sure that they build out to all locations and that those locations get the speeds that are required.
Okay. We have 25 electric co-ops in the state. Is that right?
We do. And of the 25, 17 are building out. Okay. And so that has really propelled our state forward. So a lot of our most rural areas are covered now or will be covered. Okay. I know Delta Electric is working extremely hard in the Mississippi Delta, and they have committed to covering their entire service area. So if you're a customer of Delta Electric, at some point over the next few years, you will be covered with fiber broadband service.
Okay.
And they've got a couple of CPF applications in. I know they'll be applying for BEAD as well. So we have a large area of unserved in southwest Mississippi. I live in Brookhaven.
Yep.
It's a big issue down there. And there is a provider that has already received federal funding through RDOF that we talked about earlier, who hadn't started building yet, but they have some deadlines coming up. So they have a project that's starting. They're applying for additional funding. So I think we are really on the move and are going to see a tremendous amount of work over the next couple of years.
What about traditional telecom carriers? Are they eligible to participate in this as well?
They are. They are.
Because that hasn't always been the case, has it? And there have been some stipulations under the old USDA grants where maybe they couldn't meet all the requirements. I'm trying to recall this. It's been a few years. But
I think it's more about the service. And
okay.
Can you provide the service? And,
okay.
And quite honestly, Gerard, it's do you want to?
Do you want to?
Because
that's right.
These are such low density areas. Sometimes it's only maybe 3 houses per mile. And then what if one of those says, I don't care anything about the internet? So then you only have 2 customers perhaps per mile. So the cost to reach out into the rural areas has just been too high.
It's a very long payback period on the initial investment. But then you've also got, as you and I have talked about, you've got the ongoing cost of keeping all that stuff up and running all the time.
You do. And, a tree, if it's aerial fiber, a tree limb's down on it, you got to roll a truck out there. I mean, so there are tremendous costs associated with this. But by putting this capital cost in, hopefully that is going to draw providers out into our rural areas.
Yeah. And
we're committed to finding that provider for every area in the state of Mississippi.
Okay. So is it fair to say the goal is to achieve complete coverage?
It is, to complete coverage across the state. Now, we have some areas that we've identified as extremely high-cost locations, over, say, $15,000 to reach those locations. And the rules of this BEAD program allow there to be alternative technology, whether that might be some fixed wireless, we could subsidize something for them.
Satellite wireless as well, is that possible?
I'm waiting on some clarification from that on the feds.
Okay.
But it doesn't make sense to spend $100,000 to reach 1 or 2 locations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So,
and that's about what it costs in some cases when you're trenching fiber and then terminating it as well. So it's very expensive.
It does. But I would encourage you to be, if you have a community that you believe is unserved, underserved, to really watch for an effort in your area. There will be some information pushed down from your local community, local government, on how you could participate in this challenge process. Yeah.
Anything, Sally, you need from the legislature at this point?
There are some conflicting statements or rules within our legislation, the BEAM Act, and then the feds.
So you may need a little clarification coming up?
We may need a little clarification,
All
yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Who are you working with now in the legislature that's responsible for that?
Well,
we don't know right now.
But Public Utilities and in the House, Scott Bounds has been a tremendous leader in all things broadband. And then my friend Joel Carter, Senator Carter, is chair of energy in the Senate. But, those will probably change.
We don't know if that's going to be the case.
Committees usually change.
Once we come
we'll
back.
See. The good news is I know most of those folks.
Yeah.
I served for 10 years.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm comfortable with them, and we really are looking at how we can kind of reconcile. There is a statement in the state statute that allows federal law to prevail, but I would like some clarification.
Okay. In terms of the projects which have been completed, have you been pleased with the performance of the ECAs and so forth?
Heck yeah. It's fiber.
Yeah.
It's fast.
But let me restate that. I shouldn't have used the word performance. What I mean by is performance in completing the project as opposed to performance of the actual bandwidth itself.
Yes. The EPA's really moved pretty fast because they were using aerial fiber.
Yeah.
It is a little slower with entities that are using buried fiber.
Yeah.
And because you have some different permits. You've got an architectural permit you've got to get, or archaeological, I mean. And then there's some environmental permits. So, it is not necessarily a certain provider as it is maybe a certain location in the state that might cause
more of a challenge.
There's there's a railroad track you got to cross or a river or something. So there are challenges all around.
Egress points, I think as we call them. So to deal with all that
But we're working
stuff.
on all of those, and it's just really exciting to be a part of this effort.
Yeah, okay. Well, it sounds like things are well underway, and where can people go to find out? I know some stuff's under construction, but where can they go to find out more?
By Thursday, beam.ms.gov. And I think the most instructive will be that map that is up, the bead map. You can look at the map and see. You can pull up your own location, your own address.
And that's going to be maintained real time, right?
Yes,
okay.
Real time. You can look at your address, see who your providers are, what speeds they offer. And this is all information that has been reported by the providers.
Gotcha. All right, Sally. Glad you stayed to give us more information.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right, folks, we're coming right back with a final segment on middays from the Element Wealth